To some people, branding on the back of a smartphone might mean that there's a bit of a tether, maybe a ball and chain, if you will. But for Sony, it does mean new horizons for their flagship device. And because of T-Mobile, the Sony Xperia Z1 has made it to the US with a few changes. Do they really change the experience all that much, though? Well, we're here to find out. Because it's Joshua Vergara from Android Authority. What's going on, everybody? And this is the Sony Xperia Z1 S. Now, for pretty much all intents and purposes, this is very much the same phone as the original Sony Xperia Z1, with a couple different changes underneath, which we'll get to in a moment. After all, this is the same glass finish all around the phone, making for a very premium feeling device in the hand. And the skeleton that puts it all together and keeps it all together is, instead of metal, now made of plastic. This does make for a lighter phone, and if you look in this particular shot, there is actually a little bit more length on this version of the phone compared to the original. After that, though, you have the same overall layout with the silver power button and the ports and micro SD and SIM card slots covered with small bits of plastic. After that, the only real changes are in the headphone jack, which has been moved more to the middle, and of course the T-Mobile logo proudly stamped on this phone's lower back. Overall, this is the same experience when you have it in your hand. It is a bit of a large device for what is supposed to be sporting just a 5-inch screen, and that is mostly due to the bezels around the screen. There's a little bit more real estate at the top and at the bottom particularly, which makes for a phone that's a little bit larger than most other 5-inch devices out there. The display is the very same one that you remember from the Xperia Z1. This is a 5-inch display at 1080p resolution, the triluminous display that is backed by the X-Reality engine. And in the end, you do still get the same great quality that was there in the original Z1, so if you remember what that one was like, it's pretty much the same here, with great display quality, especially when you're looking at it head on, because as has become a trait of many Xperia devices recently, the viewing angles really aren't that great. But as long as you're looking at it head on, this is akin to a small Sony TV. In the performance aspect, the Z1S doesn't disappoint because it continues the tradition that the Z1 originally started with, having the fastest processing package available today, and that is the Snapdragon 800 with the Adreno 330 and 2 GB of RAM. As a result, power is never in shortage, and the already minimalistic Xperia UI moves along just fine without really much incident at all. In the hardware department, the first thing we will talk about is the fact that even though the plastic skeleton in here is different from the metal one that we saw in the Xperia Z1, the reason why that happened is because T-Mobile was worried about reception issues due to the metal. With the plastic, you should get better reception quality, at least in the eyes of T-Mobile. But also, the certifications that made the original Z1 water resistant and dust proof return here as well. So this phone right here can take a tumble or even take a plunge, and it will come back ready for more. After that, we do have expandable storage in that micro SD card slot that bolsters the 32 GB built in, at least in this particular device. And the usual bevy of connection abilities is included, along with 4G LTE support, so you can take advantage of T-Mobile's high-speed network. And then of course there is the 3000 mAh battery that provides quite a bit of longevity for this device. There is a lot of power underneath, and that screen is quite good, so 3000 mAh will get you maybe about a day or a day and a half in terms of moderate to heavy usage, but the Xperia UI does come with a lot of power-saving features, so as long as you take advantage of those, you should be able to eke out just enough from this phone that you need, maybe a little bit more. And then we move on to the camera, which is a 20.7 megapixel camera that brings very powerful optics in this G lens. An f2.0 aperture brings initial low light capabilities, and then there is software stabilization found within the app. Now, speaking of the app, it does unfortunately come with the same problems as the original Z1. 20.7 megapixels is a great number, and it does yield you very, very large photos. Unfortunately, when you want to come down from that number, it goes straight to 8 megapixels. Even worse, 20.7 megapixels is used in the 4:3 aspect ratio, and I'm a 16:9 guy. So if I want to use 16:9 aspect ratio, which is what I almost always use, I have to jump all the way down to 8 megapixels. It's just really a bummer. And the trump card in this camera is its app enhancements, as it does come with a lot of smaller apps that can further enhance your photography. Things like adding dinosaurs to your scene, modifying your shot creatively, and sharing your view live to social media networks are all possible, with even more capabilities in the pipeline, with more applications being developed for the camera on the Xperia line. Unfortunately, with all of that goodness, you do have to look at the quality of the photos, and unfortunately, it does suffer from lackluster processing. It's just an inconsistent performer when it comes to really good quality shots. The main problem comes in the darker details, or rather lack thereof, because the darker areas show up really fuzzy and lack detail. It's always in the darker tones inside of a photo that things start to get really smudgy. And you can get some low light shots out of this camera, but they're not going to come out very detailed like I just said. And finally, we make it over to the software. Now, what is actually called the Timescape UI is what I usually call the Xperia UI. And in that regard, the Xperia UI is actually a pretty classical type of navigation when it comes to getting around Android. However, there are some enhancements that Sony put in that really do sweeten the pot. What we have here is inside of the recent apps button, these small apps. Now, these are very familiar to any Xperia users out there. These are small applications that show up on top of your current workspace to allow you to get some quick multitasking done. After that, certain applications that really give you that Sony-esque experience are added in as well, like obviously the Walkman for listening to your music and the album for looking at your photos and videos. PlayStation Mobile is available in here, but from my experience, while some of the games on there are quite fun, they basically just pale in comparison to the full offerings that you're probably already enjoying in the Play Store. All in all, what really makes us like the Xperia UI is that it's pretty simplistic while being very elegant. It is quintessentially Sony in its style and its color scheme, but for anybody that has used an Android device before, especially ones that are more stock-like, you should have no problem getting into this phone and getting around quite easily without any time at all. And finally, we make it over to the price. Yes, this is a T-Mobile exclusive phone, and as such, it does come on their no contract plans. So you're going to pay $0 down up front, but $22 a month for 2 years is on top of whatever plan you're going to get. And as is the case with T-Mobile's plans, you do have to pay off the entirety of the phone in the time that you're using it, and that total in 2 years will come at about $530. And so, there you have it. The Sony Xperia Z1S, the version that is now available in the United States courtesy of T-Mobile. This is very much like the original Xperia Z1, which we did like, even though we were a bit underwhelmed mostly by the camera. Despite the hype that it had, it just didn't perform the way that we were hoping it would. But the rest of the experience is actually quite good, and for a phone as sturdy as this, with the glass all around, premium feel, nice user experience, this is still quite a steal when it comes to the Android space. And because of T-Mobile's pricing schemes, you can get this phone for $0 down and get an entry point into the Android space, into one of the best ones that might be out there today. So as always, thank you guys very much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this review of the Sony Xperia Z1S. Don't forget to check out all of our other content here at the Android Authority channel, especially our CES coverage from last week. We're all recovering from the craziness that was the Consumer Electronics Show of 2014, and I hope you guys really enjoyed our coverage from there. We have the Best of CES 2014 video right over there, and make sure you check it out because that's one of my favorite videos that I've ever put together. After that, make sure you check out my other brothers in Android, Jace, Joe, and Kevin the Tech Ninja for all of their great content as well. And keep it tuned here. Subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. And remember, Android Authority is your source for all things Android.